Good morning. Let's turn in our Bibles to Esther chapter 1. Esther chapter 1. Reading from verse 1. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and blue and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. We just pause to take a close look at what we have just read. King Xerxes threw a party. Who is this King Xerxes? If any of you has seen the movie 300, okay, this is the Persian ruler of that movie. Okay? So this is that same man who's featured over here. He threw a party. How long did the party last? 180 days. That's how long? 6 months. That's half a year. 6-month long party. What did he do in that party? At the end of that, there was a 7-day long party. That's a second party that he threw. So, a 6-month long party. What did he do in that party? Showed off his vast wealth. He showed off his vast wealth. Now, I just want us to reflect on one word in the English language. Ostentatiousness. You familiar with that word? Ostentatiousness. Okay? When a person displays who he is, what he has done, for all the others to see, admire, feel jealous, feel inferior, whatever. So, ostentatiousness is the proud display of who you are, what you have accomplished, so that others may look up to you, admire you, feel small in your presence, feel jealous of you. All that goes under the name ostentatiousness. Okay. So, can we say King Xerxes was ostentatious? Yes. Okay. There is this proud display of all that he has and what he has accomplished, for all the people to see and admire. There is something else that is going to happen. You will notice that the list of invitees includes all the military generals, and several layers of military officials have been invited to attend. When you see someone who is very well off, what do you feel? What do you feel? Okay, doesn't matter. Good for you. Huh? There is a wishful longing within. If only I was like that. If only I had stuff like that. If I only had fame and comfort and safety and whatever else like that, then there is a wishful longing that I should be like that. And if one is not like that, then what does one feel? One feels miserable. One feels miserable. So, there is this ostentatious display. Now, as we have always said, our Bible studies are not about people who have lived thousands of years ago. They are about you and me. Living our lives out here and now. So, we'll ask a question. How appropriate is ostentatiousness for a Christian? Is it appropriate? Why don't we want to answer this question? Is it because we are also sometimes ostentatious? Not on Xerxes' scale, okay? We can't measure up to this guy. But in some way, we display. There are some places where ostentatiousness makes itself evident. What are some places where it is evident? Sorry? Our vehicles. Okay? Our vehicles, marriages, our homes, okay? Clothing. Okay, these are all places where we have an opportunity to display who we are and what we have done. Okay? All these have a function. Ostentatiousness is not one of them. But we use these as avenues for display. Okay? We use these as avenues for display. Like, if I'm buying a vehicle, for the same price, or for a little more, if I can buy one which is bigger, with a longer extension beyond the windshield, then I'd like to go for it. Very often, the extra we spend is not necessity. Extra we spend is for the display. How other people will see. Our homes, when people walk in, they have to be hit by who we are and what we have done. So on display may be our trophies. The question arises, what's the point in a trophy if you can't display it? will display all this for people to see and admire. Let's just stop over here, put a finger over here, and let's turn in our Bibles to Isaiah chapter 39. Isaiah chapter 39. This going a little further back in time. Before the Persians, they were the Babylonians. Verse 1. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift because he had heard of his illness and recovery. So, let's understand the context. Hezekiah was sick. If you remember, the prophet Isaiah had come down to him and told him what? Set your house in order, for you're going to die. Okay, this is that illness. Isaiah came and said, set things right in your life, because this is the end. The end has arrived. Hezekiah couldn't take it. He felt he hadn't lived long enough. So he wept and begged the Lord, and the Lord granted him an extension of life. Hezekiah must have been a very sick man, because when Isaiah told him, okay, the Lord has heard your prayers, you live, He's granted you an extension of life. Hezekiah wanted a sign. So Isaiah asked him, so what do you want me to give you as a sign? Should the shadow move across the sundial forward? He said, no, that will anyway happen. Make the shadow move back. Making the shadow move back. We know a little bit of geography. We know shadows don't move. It's the earth that turns. To make the shadow move back, you have to stop the earth, make it turn the other way. So shadows will move back all over the world. Not just at the sundial. Okay? So, Babylonians who were sun worshippers and astrologers saw this, and a little bit of investigation, they came to know it was something connected with the illness of a Jewish king and his recovery from it. So they immediately sent, verse 2, verse 1, they sent him a gift. They sent ambassadors to meet him, greet him, and perhaps learn a little about what happened. Hezekiah received the envoys gladly and showed them what was in his storehouses. The silver, the gold, the spices, the fine oil, his entire armory, everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show. Why had they come? They had come to get an angle on his recovery from illness. One would think this was a golden opportunity for sharing your testimony. Man, I was sick. I almost died. God was merciful. He healed me. Praise the Lord. That's what they had come to hear. But that is the one thing they did not hear. Because Hezekiah was overawed by his visitors. See, Hezekiah ruled over a kingdom which on the map was about this big. Babylon was big. The great king of Babylon had sent his ambassadors to meet him. So you can't be wearing your poor rags when they come. So he put on his display. Okay. He showed them everything, all his treasures. He showed them his armory, everything. Verse 3. Then Isaiah the prophet went to King Hezekiah and asked, what did those men say? Where did they come from? From a distant land, Hezekiah replied, they came to me from Babylon. The prophet asked, what did they see in your palace? They saw everything in my palace, Hezekiah said. There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them. What did they see in your palace? Is God interested in what people see when they come home? Yes. And for Hezekiah, visitors at home was an opportunity to show off. And he did that. They saw everything in my palace, Hezekiah said. There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord Almighty. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Okay? Those same visitors will go back and report what they saw. And it will make the king of Babylon hungry. Why not? I capture Judah and bring the treasures of Judah here. Okay? Then the time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. Then some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood who will be born to you, will be taken away. They will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon, serving him. The real treasures of the palace, his own children, they will also be taken off. They will be castrated and they will be made to serve the king of Babylon. Verse 8 is the shocker. The word of the Lord you have spoken is good, Hezekiah replied, for he thought there will be peace and security in my lifetime. I am saying, God has passed judgment. My children will suffer, but that's okay. I can live with that. That is what money, the love of it, and the proud display of it does to a person. I'm happy I could display my wealth. Ostentatiousness. Okay. Let's turn to another passage in the Bible, this time in James. This time in 1 John, sorry. John, chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. Everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does. The boasting of what he has and does, ostentatiousness. The boasting of what he has and does comes not from the Father, but from the world. What does the Bible tell us? Ostentatiousness does not originate in God. God is not the author of ostentatiousness. When he came to the earth as a human being, it was not with a proud display of heaven's glory. Born to a poor family, a family that could not even afford the normal offering for a firstborn son. Okay? What they brought to the temple was what the poorest people could buy or even catch with their hand. Born into a poor family, lived his life in poverty, associated himself not with the A-listers of that time, those who made it to the who's who of the ancient world, but associated himself with the poor, the downtrodden. He lived among them. Ostentatiousness does not come from him. His home was not really his home. His home was Peter's home. That's where he lived and worked, at Capernaum. Okay? He lived among poor people. Walked wherever he went, seeking no personal comfort. The last time he entered Jerusalem was when he rode a donkey, and which was not his. He borrowed it. His disciples told the owner, the Lord has need of it, and he will send it back shortly. He didn't even buy it. There was a way Rome paid its executioners. A man who was executed, his possessions were normally confiscated by the government. After the government took its share, whatever was left was distributed among the soldiers who carried out the execution. This was their pay for the job they did. In his case, all that they got was what was on him. The clothes that he wore. That's all. The last week, each of the disciples, after the evening meeting, went back to someone's home, because everyone had some relative in Jerusalem. He went off to the Mount of Olives, where he spent the night. So that when a man says, Lord, I want to be your disciple, the Lord looked at him and said, foxes have holes, birds have nests, kuch to hai. Son of man has no place to lay. Unostentatious God. We are the children of the unostentatious God. Then, if you remember, the night before he was crucified, they walk into this place where they are to have their last meal together. In those days, they didn't have roads like ours. Roads were often just dust, compacted. So when the weather turned dry, you walked on those roads, your feet became very dusty. So normally, when a guest came calling, a servant will rush to the door with a little water for the guest to wash his feet. That's how a host received his guests. But this was not one of their homes. Okay? It had been arranged for them to meet. So since it was not anybody's home, no one felt it was something he should do. Perhaps one of them might have told one of the others, why don't you fetch some water? Then we can all wash our feet. Instead, what broke out was an argument among them as to which of them was the greatest. The outcome was everyone went and sat down for the meal without washing their feet. Because no one was so small that he should fetch water and pour it for the others to wash their feet. Okay. Then the Lord saw what was happening. He took off his robe, laid it aside, wrapped a towel around his waist, took a bowl, filled it with water, and then went on the floor and began to wash their feet. And did you notice? No one protested. They happily gave him their feet to wash. Till he came to Peter, who was the only one who said, don't do it, Lord. You're not going to do this to me. All the others were too caught up in their self-importance to even protest. Lord, what are you doing? I'll do it. I'll do it. You get up, put on your robe. Give me the ball. Let me do it. Nobody did it. It's a lowering of their dignity. Huh? Unostentatious God, who said, I have not come to be served, but to serve. Not so that I might gain, but so that I may give my life for many. Unostentatious God. So, the God we serve is unostentatious. Why then are we ostentatious? Okay. So, verse 16 is set between verse 15 and 17. So, let's read the whole passage. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father. But where does it come from? It comes from the world. And what does verse 15 say? Do not love the world or anything in the world. Ostentatiousness comes from the world. The world is ostentatious. Okay? The world lives to display. A man will go easy on his basic necessities so that he will have money for display. When I was in college, one of my classmates wore the same pant for 2 years. The same shirt for 2 years. And the same banian, which were so full of holes that you could see them through his shirt, is what he wore for 2 years. 5 days of the week, he will wear the same thing without washing. On Friday, he will wash it so that Monday he can have it clean. This is how he used to live. So he thought he must be very poor. Engineering drawing. His rubbers will be so small. They will be rubbers which he has used in school, worn till they have become like this. His pencils would be so small. We thought he was very poor. Second year, he got married. Okay, those days government was not very strict about age. So we attended the wedding. We were stunned. We'd been to his house. In his house, the only furniture was a bench. They lived in a single room house in Dadar. His mother was sitting on the floor and she had her stove on the floor. They had no other furniture except for this bench where some things were kept and everything was brought down so that we could sit on it. We thought he was so poor. And when we went to the wedding, we were shocked. We were shocked. At the display of wealth. We thought they must have taken a huge loan to manage the wedding expenses. It was in a sports stadium. And the way the whole place was done up, we were astonished. So one of our friends asked him, "Hey, kharcha hua rahega na? Why you had to borrow money?" And the boy simply said, "We have not borrowed money. This is ours." Then he asked, but he thought you were very poor. No, हमारे में ऐसा ही है, शादी के टाइम. We put up otherwise we live simply. Because if we spend money every day, then we can't do this. This is very important in our community. For a person not from that community, this was a shocker. So, we returned back to our hostel in the night. Most of us, our keys were with somebody else. Everyone's door could be opened. So, everyone opened his lock, removed that one pant and one shirt and one banian and his underwear, took it out and burnt it. He hadn't thrown it off. After his wedding, he was planning to continue wearing that. He saved, his parents saved, so that, I want to tell you, this is happening in IIT Bombay. This boy, brilliant fellow, the only person I met in a campus who had done his entire education in municipal school. His father didn't spend money. Okay? And at the institute, there was a scholarship called Merit Cum Means Scholarship, for which they had applied. So they weren't paying fees even in IIT. They saved to display to the other members of their community their past wealth. And we thought that was stupid. What if your son dies before he gets married? Then for whom have you saved all that? But how ridiculous. But we always do this. Whatever we are selecting, furniture, maybe comfort, durability should be the criteria. But the criteria we go by is primarily looks, secondarily comfort and durability. दिखने में our safety door is more about the show than about the safety. Everything. Whatever we have is for display. Ostentatious living. Verse 16 again. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father. Why? Because he is unostentatious. Doesn't come from the Father, but from the world. Then the grim reminder, the world and its desires pass away. Don't they? The world and its desires pass away. But the man who does the will of God lives forever. May God give us grace to lay aside ostentatiousness. Let's get back to Esther. As we read on in the chapter, what do we read? We read of how, read on in the chapter and beyond, we read about how King Xerxes elevates a man. His name is Haman. And makes him the Grand Vizier or the Prime Minister of Prime Ministers, because Persia was not a simple country. No? Persia was an empire. Within it were countries. Okay? Xerxes was an emperor. He was not just a king. Okay? He was king over Persia proper. But he was also the emperor of a vast empire that extended from North Africa to Burma. Okay? India was one of its many provinces. Okay? That's how India is mentioned in this book. But the India of Persia is not the India that we have today. The India of Persia was from Afghanistan to Burma. entire region was one province, and the emperors of Persia felt Delhi is a strategic place, and they were the ones who chose Delhi. Otherwise, India was small petty kingdoms fighting with each other. They continued that way within Persia, but they all paid tribute to the emperor of Persia. So it was entirely one province, the province of India, with Delhi as the capital, and one Persian governor would be stationed at Delhi. Okay? So, you might remember what you have learnt in history in school, no? The Kushans. Okay? They were kings who descended from the Persian governors. When this part broke off from the central Persian rule. Anyway, so here was this vast empire. Each province had a governor, and each kingdom had its king, and they had their own ministers and prime ministers, and there was the prime minister of prime ministers. That was Haman. Okay. A very big man. Let's take a look at the map. Let's go to chapter 5. Esther chapter 5, verse 10. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above all the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. Okay, well, stop here. So, an ostentatious ruler, what does he breed? Ostentatious subjects. Correct? An ostentatious ruler breeds ostentatious subjects. If this is how the kings are, this is how their subjects will be. So here is his prime minister. That's what he does. He calls his friends together and boasts about his wealth, about his accomplishments, about the honors that have been heaped on him, about the special favor the queen is showing him. All that he displays. Ostentatious people make others also to be ostentatious. Unostentatious God, who declares this display of who I am and what I have done. This does not come from God, but it comes from the world. He is deeply pained watching our ostentatious behavior. Okay. If ostentatiousness breeds ostentatiousness, okay, then suppose I have a proud display at an occasion in my house. I have it. I have the money. I can afford it. Then what happens to another person who is closely associated with me, who does not have the means? Then what does he have to do? He borrows money to do it. Which is how people end up. Borrowing huge amounts of money. Banker. Correct? Yeah, banker not in agreement. Banks run on ostentatious behavior of people. We should not leave Moses. He's coming back after a long time. But then that is how it is. No? If I am ostentatious, and if it breeds ostentatiousness, and if a man cannot afford it, then he borrows money. Spends the rest of his life repaying his loans. Where does living beyond our means come from? This is where it comes from. A desire to show off. A man will actually go abroad when he has nice land over here which could be worked. He will go abroad. There he may be a crane operator. Then he will return with flashy glares, fancy clothes and electronic gadgets, and his neighbor looks at him. And then neighbor sells property, contacts an agent, he wants to send his son there. Ostentatiousness fuels ostentatiousness. Where will it end? Unostentatious God wants us to live unostentatious lives. Sometimes ostentatiousness is there in the church itself. It is there in the church. You heard that expression, Sunday clothes? In England, where the phrase originated, humble people will normally wear work clothes through the week. Okay? They'll be often torn, patched. Okay? In those days, if what you were wearing was torn, patched, it was not a fashion statement. It was genuinely torn and patched. Okay? So, that's what they'll be wearing through the week. Then, for Sunday, they will have a special set of clothes, which will be kept for Sunday. So, early in the morning, they will wake up, have a bath, and wear their Sunday clothes to church. Okay? The origin was not evil. Believe me. The origin was, if I go to meet the king, I won't go in my rags. I will even sell something to buy before I go and meet the king. How much more when I am going to meet the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? This is the original thought behind Sunday clothes. Even the poorest of the poor got nice clothes so that is how they will present themselves to God. But then what happens now? Like all culture and tradition, what starts off good eventually becomes a competition between my Sunday wear and your Sunday wear. Eventually, it becomes a proud display. So that even a person who can ill afford a suit will wear a suit. It became that. Churches themselves were places where the unostentatious God was preached about in an ostentatiously garish building. Churches in Europe became a proud display of wealth. Again, It didn't start off evil. In Istanbul, when it was Constantinople, they built a huge basilica. The architect who designed it and the king who financed it had only one thought. God is glorious. This is His house. Okay, theologically that may not be right, but this was their theology. This is His house and it must display His glory. So the architect who designed it felt every color that is seen in nature and conceivable to the mind should be displayed there. A rich display. The walls were encrusted with precious and semi-precious stones. Then when the Muslims came, the whole thing was looted and today it is a mosque. I am talking about what was the Hagia Sophia, the Basilica of Divine Wisdom. Today it is a mosque, the Blue Mosque. That is its origin. Okay, but what I am saying is, originally it was like that. A display of the glory of God. But today, a congregation will be spurred to shell out money it can ill afford because anyway, we have built this. It's not so much for whom it is built, but we have built it. We raise funds to erect this edifice. Okay. Ostentatious churches will breed ostentatious congregations and put people into a dead trap. Because there are certain things that you have to do. Okay? When we were children, my dad was a railway man. So his friends were mostly government employees. And in those days, government didn't pay fancy sums. So we'd go for a wedding, and very often what will be given will be a sweet. That's it. Then time passed. As we grew older, the sweet became an ice cream or an aerated drink. But that's all at a wedding. Believe me. I'm talking about a reception. Wedding feast for relatives, that was a different matter. Then, the years went by. Someone served biryani. Then biryani became the rule. Then, someone arranged a buffet. Someone else arranged a buffet. Today you tell me, if your son or daughter is getting married, will you think of sending them home with an ice cream? No, you can't. Because the pressure is on. What pressure? We look at people who smoke and say they have succumbed to peer pressure. What pressure? Peer pressure. And we don't think we are succumbing to peer pressure over here. This is not peer pressure. Karna hi hai na, shaadi hai, so you have to do these things. You have to invite 1,000 guests. You have to do this. Even if you don't have the money, you have to somehow manage. Beg, borrow, steal. But weddings have to be done this way. 300 years back, people got married without wedding cards. But today, card chapana hi hai. Though everyone can be invited on WhatsApp. Anything wrong? That's all that is needed. And card is not something that you pay 50 paise for. Na? People will go, people will select. Everything. Okay, it's a special day. So there should be a special way to remember the special day. Okay. Ostentatiousness is about an overdrive that we get into for the sake of the display. Okay. Ostentatiousness does not become us. God wants us to focus more upon the inner perfection than upon the outer display. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for speaking to us. We pray that we will not just be a people who reflect on your word, but a people who live out your word. We pray that each one of us will drive ostentatiousness far from us. Help us to cut a low profile in life. Help us to be simple. Help us to be humble. Help us to be true children of our Heavenly Father here on earth. We commit us into your hands, Father. Thank you for hearing us. In the precious and worthy name of our Lord Jesus, we pray.